time to ham up.
Oh, I gotta really try hard.
Shut it down!
Somehow it's the best.
After the credits.
A YumChunks podcast.
YumChunks!
Water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only YumChunks, master of all podcasts, can stop them. In tonight's episode of After the Credits, a YumChunks podcast, we're going to talk about the new Pixar movie, Elemental. And with me to talk about this movie is Sean Davis.
I'm here. You forgot about Heart, the fifth element.
Oh, that's right.
That unites us all.
That's true. And also a special guest with us today to talk about Elemental is our good friend Kev Young.
Hey, thanks for having me. I think the fifth element is actually Mila Jovovich.
Oh, dang it, you're right.
This is true. Well, great. Now that we got that sorted, of that we need more than just those four elements. We're going to need Heart and Mila Jovovich
Yes.
to summon Captain Planet and defeat the Fire Nation. Also, I'm Ryan Davis.
Oh yeah, that's good.
That's kind of important. Nah, it's not. But
Is it? I mean, not you specifically. It's important that you're Ryan Davis. I mean, do
Are
listeners
any of our
care
names
yeah.
important?
yeah, that's a good point.
Does anything matter?
We'll get to the elemental discussion in a bit. Heyo.
Good one.
I guess. I don't know. But I think, Kev, you were talking about Thor last time? When you were on?
Last time I was on here as a vocal presence was, in fact,
that
Thor.
That is true. You
I've
have been
emailed
a
you guys
very
plenty.
big presence. Yeah. And so, listeners, if you've been loving any of our recent discussions about just film criticism at all, then you could thank Kev, because most of that has been prompted by Kev's emails. So.
That's correct. Yeah, I really enjoyed you guys and all those discussions. And it was just so funny. You guys sounded like you were arguing with me, but then I agreed with everything you said. And it was just like, I don't know what we're discussing at this point.
Well, especially Chewy's not here, but it was just, I feel like Chewy would even come across, Chewy, if you're listening to this, aggressive, but it was like, no one's fighting here. We're all kind of agreeing on the same thing.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting.
Yeah. We can't talk about something unless it's very aggressive, even if we're
Exactly.
agreeing with everything we're saying to each other. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, let's before we get into the discussion of Elemental, let's do a round. Chunkfire, Kev, I think you remember how the old Chunkfire works. If you have something to
I've
share.
worn my hands by that fire before.
Oh, good.
We saved you a spot.
Well, since you are the special guest, why don't you kick it off?
Sure, why not? I have the amount of media that I've been consuming has decreased in the past couple weeks because I've been in the middle of a big moving to a new city and all that stuff. So it's been hectic, but I have managed to squeeze in a few things. Of course, I won't go on about it too long because I'm sure you guys have already or will talk about the new Indiana Jones movie, which I saw last week. It's pretty good.
We listeners, what? Where's their Indiana Jones episode? It's coming.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Good. But yeah, I liked it. I certainly, it was more fun for me than Crystal Skull. And that same day I saw a pretty cool documentary called Every Body, which is about the fight for equal rights for intersex people, which was really interesting. It's a perspective that I hadn't really heard much about, and it was a pretty well-made documentary. They just have a lot of intersex people talking about what their struggles are and how hard it is to get representation, and it was good. It was, it's always good to learn about a segment of society that you don't know a lot about.
I think I've seen a trailer for that, and it did look really interesting and, insightful.
Yeah, it was cool. And then yesterday I saw the film Past Lives, which I really recommend. It's just a little drama about a Korean immigrant who comes to America and reconnects with an old friend from Korea, and it's just a really romantic and pleasant film, just really emotional and nice. I would say it's a great date movie if you're looking for a movie to take somebody on a date with, because it's very sweet.
Aww. So, should we see it by ourselves?
Are we
I
allowed
saw
to
it by myself.
Are we allowed? Okay.
So, and I quite enjoyed it. I ended up crying a lot at the end, so it's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes you just got to go on a date with yourself. That's the most important relationship.
Of course, yeah. And beyond that, I guess I recently finished the TV show Silo on Apple TV Plus, and I can't say that I really recommend it, but it was a diversion.
That's good. That sums up a lot of our media. That's the one with it's what's her name? Jones.
Rebecca Ferguson.
Rebecca Ferguson and Jones.
Rashida Jones, yes.
Rashida Jones, that's it. I couldn't think of her first name. I've seen the first episode and was kind of into it. It seemed like an interesting world they were setting up.
Yeah.
But I have not watched any more. So.
It does not maintain the promise of that first episode, which I think was really good also.
Yeah.
But, it's an interesting sci-fi concept. I think it kind of feels like they had this cool concept and then weren't sure what to do with it, and it kind of flounders for most of the season, not really being sure. But, it's got some cool ideas, I guess, and cool music, so that's something. I mean, I watched the whole thing and was like, all right, well, that wasn't, like, bad. So, I guess time well spent.
Yeah, I mean, we've had far worse in Chunkfire sharing and stuff.
Yeah, this is true.
It's on Apple, right? I think.
Yeah, Apple TV Plus. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you kind of briefly glossed over it, but you said you moved recently.
Yes.
You don't have to, but what's the deets of that? What's that all about?
Oh yeah, well, I can go into a little bit of detail. I guess people who are familiar with my podcast work probably know that I was living in San Diego for the past several years. 20 years, maybe, I guess, at this point. Probably something like that. God, has it been even more than that? I think it has been. Well, anyways, I recently got accepted to UC Santa Cruz and moved there for the summer session, and I'm going to plan on getting my degree in music and venturing off into that world, so that's my plan right now. And I just, I've been settled in. It's like my second week here. I'm just sort of getting settled in, and I just happen to have the dorm room to myself right now, so I get to record this as my first podcast here in Santa Cruz, so woohoo.
Oh,
nice. Yeah.
That's an honor for us.
Special occasion.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. That's awesome, though. That's, master's, going back to school, and in music especially, so you could graduate and then do all of our theme songs, upgrade all of our theme songs.
I don't think I can top the one that you already made for Chewie and his and his mother-in-law watching the Marvel movies. It's already
a
perfect
do a case study. If you want to interview me for us for any of your classes, feel free. But
I should do a fully orchestrated version of that. That's like my
oh
thesis
my gosh,
project.
that would be beautiful. But that's great that you're going to school for music. I mean, if the world gets more Kev Young music, it makes the world a better place, in my opinion.
Thank you.
I'm a fan.
It. Thank you. Yeah, and I still have lots of music for podcasts that I haven't written yet that I've been just pushing off, just because I just got to get into the right headspace to write songs. But hopefully, I'll have a chance to keep working on all that cool podcast stuff I do while I'm also going to school and working. That's life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons I love school is it kind of forces you to get into that headspace, and then that's just what you're doing and feels more natural, and you're not having to feel like work or go out of your way to do what you wanted to do anyway.
Exactly, yeah.
But I was thinking, since you have literal albums and hundreds, dozens, if not hundreds of songs already, and your school doesn't know, UC Santa Cruz doesn't know. If you just feel like, man, I don't want to do this assignment, just, hey, look at this theme song I made about, Odo not being in an episode of Deep Space Nine, right?
Yeah, eventually it'll be like, why is every single song you write about Odo? I don't know, I just think he's cool.
Yeah. Everyone has a theme to their works, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks for joining us from Santa Cruz.
Hey,
and
my
good
pleasure.
luck on all the school, because that's really exciting and awesome. So.
Also, you know what? Elemental was the last movie I saw in San Diego before I moved.
Oh.
So, hey.
Well, this is the bridge. Yeah.
This is the bridge, yeah.
Nice.
All right, cool. Sean, yeah, you do want to go next?
Sure, yeah. Well, I don't have a ton, but one thing that's really important and is worth mentioning is that I had to take a break from Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. I know it's sacrilege, heresy, but I did take a break because a new Final Fantasy game came out this summer as well. It was a big game, or a big year for video games in general, and two of my favorite franchises of all time had new entries. And so, as much as I was neck deep into Zelda, I am taking a brief hiatus to play through Final Fantasy XVI that just came out. And I wish I was playing Zelda. Most of the time, I just wish I was playing Zelda. But it's not all bad. I do like it. It's the biggest problem with my issue with Final Fantasy 16 is that it's a Final Fantasy game. If it wasn't a Final Fantasy game, I would like it a lot more. By which I mean it's not really an RPG. It's like an action, kind of very linear story action game. And that can be cool. I love those types of games. I work for a studio that makes those types of games. But when I play Final Fantasy, I want an RPG. I want party members and leveling up and equipping cool gear and giving my guys cool elemental magic and curing poison and stuff. That sounds stupid, but I mean that's kind of what I want from Final Fantasy, and this version does not have it at all. I know Ryan obviously is, maybe not obviously, but definitely a huge Final Fantasy fan. Growing up, we played it. And Kev, I think you've dabbled in a few.
Yeah, I've played 7 and 9 all the way through.
Well, those are great ones to play. I mean, everyone has different opinions, but I definitely consider those top tier Final Fantasies.
I love them both. Yeah,
and so you get an idea of what classic kind of Final Fantasy is in terms of that RPG style, the party. Doesn't have to be turn based, but that is the traditional, more traditional style of it, and all of that's not at all present in Final Fantasy 16. And it's just kind of sad. As much as the game is a good game on its own, for what it is, I can't really. I mean, there are things that I can criticize about it, but overall, it is a good game for that. It looks beautiful. It's amazing. The graphics are amazing. The combat is fun. I think it's well-designed, fun combat. And the world building and even story and characters I'm generally into, but I don't know. It just, it's a hard sell for me. I don't know.
Well, it's definitely a hard sell for me listening to you pitch or discuss the game. I'm like, if I'm going into a Final Fantasy game, like it doesn't need to necessarily be entirely beholden to all the cliches of the genre. I like change-ups, but if it's a completely different animal altogether, it's like, well, maybe I'll just play a Devil May Cry game. Like I'm behind on
that's kind of
series
what
as
I feel.
is,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, I've said this to you in person, Ryan, and I think some other friends, but it's like if Madden 2024 comes out and it's not a football game, it's a tactical team-based roguelike. Like, what?
Yeah.
Why? It's Madden. I want it to be football. I mean, I don't personally. I don't care about Madden, but you know what I'm saying, listeners. I hope you get what I'm saying. And that's kind of what it's like Final Fantasy. Like, I'm not saying it can't be a great game if it's not an RPG, but I'm buying Final Fantasy and playing Final Fantasy because I want to play a cool, epic fantasy RPG. I want RPG elements, but
right. And it's not like Square can't do new IP. Like I don't know, maybe because what was that last game, Forsaken? Obviously, it was more RPG, but it was definitely actiony and blah blah blah. But it was a new IP, so I don't like what is tying the name to the game. Right? Like, what does the namesake even mean?
I mean, other than real vaguely loose, like, oh, look, there's a character named Sid.
That's the one unifying feature of all Final Fantasy games.
I mean, and I feel like they kind of did, it's like, well, if we name a character Sid and we put Chocobos in there, it's a Final Fantasy. and they did that, and there's, whatever, there's potions, and there's, I don't know. the summons are all the same. If some like Ifrit and Shiva, and they're so it's like very surface level. It's very just like surface level. It's Final Fantasy because of these very appearance based kind of named things, and it's like, well, I would like more than just that, but well, we'll see. I mean, like I said, I haven't finished it yet either, and I am enjoying it for what as I'm playing. So it's not like I am disliking and hating it and stuff. It's just something where I am a little. There's something in the back of my head that is a little bit sad about it, even if I am actually enjoying the game, and I think it's actually a pretty good game for the game that it is. So, anyways, so there's that Final Fantasy XVI, and then a movie I saw, and Ryan, I know you've seen this too. And we might have a little mini discussion here. Kev, apologies. But we both saw Asteroid City.
No, that's fine. Talk about it. Talk to your heart's content. I may or may not see it.
We both saw Asteroid City, the new Wes Anderson film.
Well, I guess.
Yeah, what did you think?
I guess I don't know if we briefly spoke about it. I don't remember if we just how much we liked it or anything. I'm definitely just a fan of Wes Anderson in general. So for him to do wrong in my eyes would be, I think, admittedly difficult. But having said that, I do objectively, as much as I can, be objective as a fan. I do think his films are overall very good films, and I think this is no exception. And definitely, what you're getting into in a Wes Anderson film in terms of style and kind of the way certain things will be structured and characters and that kind of thing. But I felt like this one was unique in a lot of ways because I feel like there was more that I don't understand about what the message is of the movie, which is, I don't know, does that really qualify as a difference? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it sort of is, right? Because I feel like other Wes Anderson films, you sort of can extract the meaning after a single watch, if that makes sense. Whereas this one, I feel, I need to watch it at least one more time before I really get what he's trying to say.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is one of his most, as much as all of his films in some ways are inaccessible if you're not into his style and his sensibilities. There's that element for sure in Asteroid City, but I think there's an added element that makes it a little bit even more inaccessible in terms of just the pure logistics of what's happening in the plot, what's going on. Like the way the story is told, it's kind of a frame story within a story, and they're cutting back and forth kind of between things, and once you kind of get it, it's like, oh, that's not, okay, I get it now, but it's like you're halfway through the film before you kind of fully kind of clicks into place, and by then you're like, I forgot everything that had happened up until now. And then, even when you do get it, I still, without going into spoilers or details, the ending is what?
Yeah.
The ending feels very this is going to sound very critical, but art house, student art film kind of thing. What just happened? What are they doing?
Yeah.
What just happened? So yeah, all of those things kind of add to a mix of I'm not sure where it rests in my overall rankings of his films, but in general, I'm a big fan too. And the more I think about this, there's more things that I do like about it a lot. I think on the visual style, if you're into it, this is just more of that honed to such a specific degree. The mix of practical puppets with dollhouse style sets and production, with the live action obviously and stuff, all that kind of stuff. I love that whole look and vibe, the symmetrical framing of so many things, all that kind of stuff, coloration. But also the way people talk, if you go back and watch Royal Tenenbaums now, that movie feels so normal compared, I think, to his recent works. The characters are quirky, but the film itself feels more like a normal film, whatever, quote unquote normal film. Whereas with Asteroid City, and I think a lot of his more recent ones, there's no element of it that comes across as natural. Every character is behaving in a very, very specifically curated way. And again, I appreciate that, and I generally do like it, but it can come across as, I think, pretty abrasive. And it also, it makes it harder sometimes to connect with the characters until it all of a sudden doesn't. And that's when I think he works, like, when those moments, I don't know if you, Ryan, or Kev, other works that you've seen, like, a lot of times like an intellectual exercise where you're just kind of like, oh, that's intellectually, I know that's cool because these colors, and he's saying something metaphorically, but you're not really emotionally engaged until all of a sudden you are emotionally engaged because of just a weird mix of lines and character reactions and stuff that comes out of nowhere. And it's like this scalpel, this dagger in the back that you didn't see coming because it totally wasn't that type of film. And then before you know it, a line and a character in action has like hit you straight to the core of your heart. And you're just like, oh my God, that was so heart touching and like emotional. And he like, it kind of like gives credit to what I feel he had been doing up to that point. Like, oh, he knew what he was doing because of this moment right here. And maybe I'm giving too much credit, or I don't know, but that's generally kind of, I think, and there were moments like that in this film. So that all going to say that I think it's of a piece and just as, you know, in line with a lot of his other works.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking just like about how the characters, the way they act is very specifically curated, to use that word. I think it also, at least in this film, speaks to sort of the framing device and sort of like the meta layer of the film. Not to get too many spoilers. Not that it's that big a deal. I mean, but it I think there's something to that where he's trying to connect sort of like the two, like the reality and the sub-reality, and I think he's saying something with that I can't quite piece together, especially with like the way the ending unfolds, and so there's some layers to this one that I feel are more real as opposed to being like, they're real as in terms of what is being shown on the screen as opposed to like character subtext. Yeah. So, so I think, while it is certainly in line with Wes Anderson, it is, I don't know, there's like an element to it that is very, for me, different. I
think another thing that kind of was a little bit apparent is that I feel like his recent works, French Dispatch, Budapest Hotel, and if I thought more about it, maybe I'd find more. But I feel like a lot of his works have become so much about the stories within stories, the stories we tell within those stories, but how we as storytellers are constantly trying to invoke ourselves into these stories. We're trying to enmesh ourselves into the stories themselves. Instead of it just being this objective narrator who's telling us stories, we want to be in these stories. Even if that means we're breaking fourth walls and we're like completely changing perspectives and biasing things. And I think that, you know, again, without getting spoilers for this one, there's a whole bunch of what this movie is about. It's about a frame story and that, but then French Dispatch is all about the written word, stories we're telling, literal newspaper stories, and the storytellers, the writers, being like in the stories. Like, how are they ingraining themselves in these stories themselves? Grand Budapest Hotel, similar thing. So I don't know. I think there's something to that too. As a filmmaker, he has, you know, a very like recent, if not recent, then more noticeably recent, like kind of agenda in terms of like trying to get at something about just storytelling in general, which I always appreciate those like grand meta, you know, auteur kind of like pieces that kind of all go together. So. Yeah,
I like that.
Anyways, that's but I mean, like I said, you both saw it, so that's my transition to you, Ryan. So what else
cool. Yeah, so a couple things I've been watching. I watched the second season of The Bear. We've talked about the first season a number of times on the podcast. So that, which I liked. I kind of, I don't want to go into too many details on that because it's something where if you say anything about it, I feel like it's somehow, for just being a drama with no, you're looking at like these sci-fi stories and stuff, and we're just like, oh, no spoilers because it's like these big reveals and all that kind of thing. That's not always, that's not exactly the case for dramas, and especially a drama just about cooking. But I think there's enough, like, just so much heart and thought and craft and et cetera, that is put into the show that even mentioning something about it is like, oh, it would ruin this nuance that you might.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to experience the nuance without me spoiling it. Anyway, and then I watched 2 movies, or actually one was a movie, one was like a mini series, but they're both about Nepal and kind of mountain climbing and things. And this has been just over a year since I returned from my trip to Nepal, so it was like I don't know, just looking back, I can't believe it's been a year for one, but and I have gotten wildly out of shape. Anyway, so I watched these. One was called The 14 Peaks. It's on Netflix, and it's about some Nepalese, some Sherpa who put together like a climbing team, and they kind of want like the Sherpa are the only reason anyone is not there isn't 100% death rate anyone going to climb the Himalayan mountains. They're getting all us Westerners out alive, myself included. So it was a group of Sherpa that got together and said, all right, we're going to climb all the 14 peaks, which is all the peaks in the world that are above 8,000 meters. So, and they do it all in 6 months, which is impossible. It is impossible that they did this, but they did. And so that was great. And then the other thing was about the 2015 earthquake in Nepal that kind of was massively devastating for the country and for climbers, because they kind of jumping back and forth between different stories, and one of them is about the people trying to survive and get through in Kathmandu, and then another story is of people that were on Everest at the time when it happened, and just the horror they experienced and just all the death that was surrounded them. I mean, you got to figure you're dancing on a knife's edge when you go up to Everest, and if there's this huge earthquake that just completely destabilizes everything, you just imagine how much worse it is. But anyway, yeah, those are just kind of reminiscing about my adventures. So yeah, that's all I really got to share. We can get into the elemental.
Cool. All right. Well, we got the fire going. Now let's bring on the air, I guess. I don't know. What is a summary if you had to turn it into an element?
What are our podcasts but a bunch of hot air, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, that'll be our opinions on it. Will be hot air.
Yeah, exactly. This is the ground. Summary is like the facts. This is the earth. This is the hard, gritty, I guess. I don't know. Right. Anyways, yes. So spoilers for Elemental. Elemental is Pixar's latest film. Elemental takes place in Element City. It's this whimsical, magical fantasy world where there's no humans. There are living elements that are like, living beings. And they all congregate in Element City. Fire, water, earth, and air. And we follow the family, this fire family, who are immigrants into Element City. And they are trying to start a new life for themselves. They have a baby on the way. They start up a shop. But fire people, fire things, fire beings are kind of like shunned in Element City. They're pushed to the outskirts. They aren't really, widely accepted. But they find their community and they raise their daughter, who is a spunky teenager named Ember, and who kind of works for her dad in this family store. She has a temper though, and sometimes customers set off her temper. And she's coming of age, and she's going to inherit her father's shop. But her father doesn't quite trust her with her anger issues and the responsibility. And one day she gets angry and blows a gasket, almost literally, because she makes pipes explode in the basement of the shop. And she meets a water guy, who is, what's his name? His name's Water Joe. Wade. And he's like, hey, you are violating city ordinances with the way you have this shop built, or the piping, or something like that. I'm going to have to shut this down. And she goes, no, 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 no. And she tracks him down to Element City, and she kind of tries to convince him and pleads with him, you can't shut down my dad's shop. So he goes, okay, we'll work together and we'll get it figured out and we'll fix it before the city shuts your shop down. So they kind of start investigating, and they bond, and they find out what the issue is, that there was water that should not be in that part of the city being leaked into that city through a sewer system, I think, of sorts. And as they're bonding, as they're investigating, they're also bonding, and they're kind of growing closer, and they kind of there's some chemistry between the two of them, and they like each other, and she meets his family, who is very, very emotional, and they're all water, so they're crying, and she's a fire thing, and oh my gosh, just can you imagine? And then, but her family is she doesn't really want to tell them about her relationship with Wade, because her dad's very traditional and doesn't want to accept him because he's a water person, and et cetera, et cetera. And it all kind of comes to a head when, she kind of tosses him off and says, no, we can't be together. We're too different. We can't, no, you just got to leave. You got to get out of here. You can't have anything to do with me. I'm going to inherit my father's shop, even if I don't want to, but that's what I'm supposed to do, because I'm a good daughter, and I'm supposed to do that, even if I have to put my own dreams aside. And he's like, no, you got to live your own dreams and live for yourself. He'll understand. He goes, no. And so she tells him off. And then it's the big night of her dad, Ember's dad's retirement. And she's going to give a big speech, or he's giving a big speech in front of the whole community. And then Wade shows up and says, and he makes a big speech instead. Can you imagine? Anyways, and it's like, no, we are together. I do love you. Or, we should be together, and you should follow your dreams, and all this stuff. And her family is, what is going on? And as that's happening, all of the sewer systems that they had been investigating kind of come to a head and explode, and water floods over all of Firetown, which, it was the immigrant community where they live, and their shop is going to be ruined, and Ember and Wade are trapped in their shop, and they're going to die if it's too hot for him, and he's going to evaporate, but if she lets in the water, she'll get flooded, and, will put out her fire, and she'll die. So it's like, well, so Wade sacrificed himself. Like, no, you have to survive. It's better that you live. Loving sacrifice kind of stuff. So he does. He dies, and she's really sad. But her family and everyone come and console her, and they kind of like, oh, he was a good guy. He wasn't a bad guy. And then, wouldn't you know it, water starts dripping off from the ceiling where he evaporated, and he didn't die. He just evaporated and soaked into the rock, and he's fine. So they both survive. There are either fireworks or gunshots going out my apartment right now. Don't worry. And she decides that she's going to go off to art school. Her dad accepts her and says, I just want you to be happy. And her and Wade are going to sail away from Element City and explore the world and adventure and be themselves and love each other. And I think that, there's some wind creatures and some earth people in there, somewhere in there, but that was Elemental. What a movie. What a summary. Yeah, Kev, you're our guest, so tell us your fiery thoughts on Elemental.
I don't know if I'd classify them as fiery.
Okay. Your watery thoughts.
They're definitely watery. I wouldn't. It's hard for me to imagine this movie whipping up strong emotions in people. But I know that it has. Largely, I think it's lower tier Pixar for me. It's like I have a lot of trouble squaring what the nature of the world that exists is. It's really confusing when I think about it for any amount of time.
Yep.
And the message that it's trying to convey, I think I get the gist of what it's trying to say, but it gets really muddled under a lot of layers of things that don't need to be there or that confuse the message. So I wonder what people come away from this movie with, because I think it's really not very clear at all on what it's trying to say. But it is clear that it's trying to say something. So I'm interested in. I'm assuming the average moviegoer probably just goes to see it and it's just like, oh, that was fun. The kids liked it. Colorful, fun gags, and I agree with all that. It looks very nice, and there are some funny gags with the elemental people, I suppose. But I had trouble connecting with the characters, and I didn't understand the world or what the movie was trying to say. So I guess I wouldn't call it a home run. I'd call it a ground double.
Ground out. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Ryan, what?
Kev covered a lot of the kind of ambiguity, on world building. I thought the world building was terrible, some of the laziest I've ever seen. The message, I think we'll get. I'm sure we're gonna dive deep underwater on that one. But it was, certainly muddled is putting it lightly. There were some things I did like about it, but overall, my experience in the theater was a very painful one. I was just kind of like either rolling my eyes or just be like, God, this thing needs to end. But after watching it and kind of like, okay, is this movie really worthy of my scorn? Like in like kind of that pain subsided. So I don't feel certainly as strongly as I did when I was like in the theater. Which, I mean, that's not saying anything good, really. It's saying, like, yeah, it's a very painful experience, but the pain goes away.
It's less bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's safe to say I did not like this movie. I also had no ability to connect with the characters. There are some things about the visual design of the film that I thought were interesting and at least something pretty to look at. But I don't have too many nice things to say about the movie other than that. So I'll leave it there. Sean, what's your take?
I mean, pretty much everything you guys are saying. I think I agree. It's not a movie worthy of hate. I do think it's probably, at least off the top of my head, my least favorite Pixar movie. But it's not a movie that I like that it warrants active hate or something. I'm not going to be going on message boards anytime soon and talking about how bad this movie is. I don't care that much.
Is there a movie that would make you do that?
No, well, I can't think
fair
of anything
point.
else, so.
Yeah,
I don't know.
we're not really those type of people, I suppose.
That type of people, which thankfully we're not, I feel.
That's good.
But I think the other thing is maybe even beyond just like the pure, like not the pure, but just the badness or the not greatness that I feel towards it is more, some of it is kind of baffling. I'm more confused about so much of it. Not strictly the world building stuff, which is very confusing, but just like confused in terms of the filmmaker's intent and what and how they were trying to do what they think they were trying to do or what they thought they were trying to do, which we'll get into. But like, I think if I could summarize the three things that kind of, like you guys said, it was the characters, but I think for me specifically it was the relationship between Wade and Ember. I thought those characters were fine, but I just did not feel that relationship at all. Like, not as a romantic relationship. To the point where it's like halfway through the film, I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. It's not about a romantic relationship. And then it is. I'm like, oh, there was no chemistry. At least I didn't feel any of it until they just blatantly said, like, oh, I like you and we're going to kiss, I guess now. So that was one main thing, which that didn't work, and that it's hard to rest the movie on that and it not working. The world building, which we've all said and we'll get into. And then the last thing is, like you said, Kev, was kind of the messaging being muddled. And I don't want to put it so specifically or so pointedly, but just for the sake of conveying and getting the ball rolling on what this conversation is, I think this film is kind of racist. And I don't mean that in a malicious, intentional way, as in the filmmakers are racist. I don't think the filmmakers are racist. I don't think if you like this film, you're racist. I don't want anyone to have the worst day at their job.
But do any of these?
Yeah. I just think that the world that is conveying, portraying, and as a film like this, an allegory, it is... I don't know how you could see this film and not take away very, very problematic views of how the world works, our world works, right? Like, if this is what this is, you can't watch this for what it is and get the messages I think they want without also getting the messages that are the... like racist. Again, not like maliciously racist, just like saying, yeah, segregation should happen. Like, maybe there were people who thought segregation was weren't like actively hateful that wanted segregation, but just the idea of segregation is a racist worldview. And I think that's what I mean when I say this film seems kind of racist in that way. Which, yeah, we'll get into plenty more, but those are my overall thoughts.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there.
Well, let's start with the more fun stuff, I guess, and that is the world building, maybe.
Yeah.
And how bafflingly confusing and nonsensical this world is.
Yeah, it's just so lazy. It's there's especially Pixar, who has a fairly good track record just with kind of like, okay, we're gonna make you believe that this entire other world exists that consists of a society of toys or of cars, and which is saying kind of a lot because Cars is one of the laziest. It's just okay, we're gonna take the human world and then the humans become cars and we're done. And honestly, that's what this is too. Like, they just said, okay, we're just gonna replace humans with these elemental things. Okay, well, wouldn't things work differently and operate differently if the world was organically built by creatures who didn't have thumbs? And why are they taking human shape? Why is anything in this world, like, it just feels so lazily, like, not even, no thought put into it. And leads to a lot of, which maybe that's okay because they're just using it as a metaphor, but then when there are plot level contrivances that are dependent on a world that makes sense, it really, really falls apart. Why are there water pipes in the house of creatures that are made of fire, to which it's lethal?
There's a specific plot point where they're like, when they're investigating, like, oh, water should have been shut off to the fire town. Like, why was there water going there at all, ever? And, okay, maybe they didn't originally build it for fire, but her father did.
Yes.
He built that. Why did he build water pipes?
There's a line in the movie that specifically says, Ember, the daughter, is saying, my father built these pipes with his own hands. Why did he build pipes full of water in his own home?
I don't know.
Maybe I'm giving you a no prize answer. Maybe the idea was he wanted to accommodate any water-based customers that came in and they need water pipes for some reason. But that sure is a lot of work to go through for that purpose, especially when he's somebody who doesn't really like water folk.
Yeah.
Right.
And then for them to then later say that, oh, there should be no water going to that section of the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
It's like both those statements don't make sense in this world on their own, and they make even less sense when thought about together.
There's so many things and then sometimes it kind of works because you were talking about some of it doesn't work, but it's like the gag kind of like, oh, that's a kind of a funny gag. If there were people that were fire, there would be look at this funny gag. And sometimes it's kind of chuckling and you don't have to think about it, but then sometimes it's a gag that, like, wait, you're undermining your own thing. Are you aware that this is late in the film? They like have to they're breaking into something, right? And so there's like a fence, and he's water, so he just like waters through the fence, and she's fire, and she just burns through the fence. And then there's a line, and he goes like, "Oh, why do they even have fences at all?" And it's kind of like a gag. It's like
it's supposed to be this gag that they're like self-aware. but that is almost like lazier than
The whole-
than
yeah.
than not acknowledging it, right? Because it's like they're saying like, oh, we know what we're doing. We're aware this doesn't make sense. We're even going to make a joke about it. But it's not enough to be self-aware. Like that is the laziest form of making a joke.
And then also, it's funny, I was thinking, like, well, what about the other types of... Oh, air doesn't need fences either. Airs could just, like, walk through... Like, so it's like, it doesn't make sense. And then there's another scene where, like, she's looking through a keyhole or something like that. Or he is, and he just goes as water through a keyhole. So it's like, why do they have locked doors? Why do they even have doors at all?
Like
Why is there locks?
If anything, it's only affecting the Earth people, but we don't... I mean, maybe they don't care either. Maybe they can reshape their bodies too. Like, it's again, this is so lazy. Like, yeah, we're just gonna take human artifacts, and those are still gonna be here. But then there's these creatures that have no use for them.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's to make the world feel more familiar to the viewer,
Sure.
which, yeah, great. But I mean, there have to be a lot of people out there who are watching this and having these same thoughts and just being like, why does any of this function the way it does? It almost feels like to me like this world was something else. It's probably something very different when they set out to write this story, and then I would guess that somebody saw this and was like, or maybe a studio exec was like, no one's going to want to watch this movie about these weird concepts. You have to make them more human-like. Make this represent human society.
Yeah, I could kind of maybe see that. Like, it's early stages where it was a world that felt more thought out and more like, a world. Because now it's like every sequence, every scene, and it's not even just like the little gags or like the logistics behind stuff, but like even it reflects on the characters sometimes, like in bad ways. Like there's the scene where they're trying to figure out where the water's coming from, and like, well, if we get up on the roof, we could get a higher view. And then she like uses her like flame to make a hot air balloon, right? And they kind of rise above the city, and they can see where the water, the canals are going and stuff. And it's kind of cool, but it's also like, wait, you are a fire thing. You would know, like, you're the first person, or that's like, it's a revelation you invented, let hot air rises. You like that, like what? Like, I don't know. It's like if humans just all of a sudden now in our current day and age just discovered that our fingers could grab things. It's like, what do you, like, what? And like, we're impressed. Like if I'm having dinner with someone and she reaches for a glass and I'm impressed that she could pick up the glass with her fingers. I'm like, whoa, that's amazing. Good. Like, whoa, you're so special. It's like, what do you mean? We're humans. We live that. Like, if you're a fire creature, you create heat. It's not you melt sand. How is that a revelation? How is that a cool, crazy, unique thing? Everyone can do that all the time. That's what fire does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One note as I was watching the film, kind of observing these things that didn't make sense, like you're saying, Sean, is just I'm imagining myself as a fire person. Or no, I'm imagining myself as a human being as I am. So it didn't take much imagination, but but just being always surrounded by lava. That's what it would be like to be a water person or a fire person, because they have a tram that for some reason cascades water everywhere as it drives by, murdering fire people as it does so. Like that is just their neighborhood town. Like you are just, we're always at all times surrounded by lava.
Yeah.
Well, they're like Gorons then.
Yeah. Yes. Oh man, I should have mentioned how much I've been playing Tears of the Kingdom during the Chunkfire, but like everyone on this podcast, I've been playing a lot of it.
I haven't.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I guess like Sean.
But I will.
Yeah. But not to get us too off track, I agree that the fact that at just about every turn there's something that will kill a fourth of the population of this city. That's insane. Like, why would this... Like, they should be segregated because they will all kill each other. Just accidentally.
Right. That's exactly what... I mean, we'll get to that when we maybe go further into that stuff. But yes, it's intrinsically, the world building that they set up is intrinsically, like, that's why I think it's a poor premise. It's a flimsy premise. And unless you purposely set out to acknowledge that and address it, it is going to be racist. It's going to be you're going to be justifying segregation in some way. Obviously, these aren't like, human races, but they obviously are supposed to be. That's what this movie's about. Right. So I don't know. And then, so there's a couple other things too that also undermine like the threat and stakes. So there's a scene like halfway through the movie when they're like, again, doing some investigation, and she melts the doors so that it blocks the water. And like this cascade of water comes by, and they're like, oh no, we're in danger. Well, maybe you are, Ember, because you're a fire person. Why are you in danger? I don't understand. Sometimes like the water rushes by them and they get swept away in the water.
Oh yeah.
And he's holding on for dear life as if he's going to die if he gets swept away in the water. He is a water person. We are introduced to him as a character coming out of a pool of water that is not all just him. So why is this a threat to him in this scene?
I was confused by that as well. Like it Shauna goes back to like, oh, you're the first fire person that realized that heat or warm air rises.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, you're a water person. You already know you can conjoin with liquid.
Yeah.
Like I don't.
His whole his whole family is a flooded building of them living in a pool of water.
I know. It reminds me of the last time I went to my girlfriend's house and her parents lived in an apartment full of lava everywhere. I was fine with it. I just tiptoed on little
They just gave you a little inflatable inflatable chair thing to sit on. You're fine. And that's another thing, another element of the world. So, okay, so let's say you have an entire species that is water. Why do they live in skyscrapers? Do a little bit of like creative thinking. Oh, they all should live in bowls as houses or cups or right. Like, why are they in 20 floors? How do they get the water up there? Why are they getting the water up there? Why are they living in skyscrapers? That's what I mean. It's the most laziest. Like, come on, just put a little bit of interesting thought into how a water creature would actually want to live. The water would go to the bottom, so they'd be in bowls, and maybe instead of roads, there would be like little streams that they flow downhill to get their jobs. I don't know, right? Like that's creative. Not it's just a normal human building that they put water in on the 20th floor. What?
Well, I mean, isn't that the idea though of Elemental City? Is that it's designed to hold all of the elements, so that way, I guess it makes sense to make domiciles that are equally inaccessible to all of them.
Yeah, that's true. That make a world that's designed for humans and is perfectly awful for any other like element. I guess that's. All that stuff.
It is like the stadium that they go to see a sporting event, and it's like these clouds that are like battling in the air, which like, okay, cool, cloud people, that makes sense. They can fly around. It's like, it's the Harry Potter thing, whatever that's called.
Quidditch.
What is it called? Quidditch. Thank you.
Quidditch.
But then all the spectators are stupidly sitting in chairs, like including the cloud people. Like, what? This is just. They thought about it for like 1 second and said, oh, because they're clouds, they can play soccer in the air. And then that's as far as I got. They said, like, well, what about the audience members? Like, can they see what's going on?
Do they have butts? I mean, do clouds have butts? That like chairs are designed because they're with vertebrae.
Right.
Like when we design chairs for cats, we don't make human chairs.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. That's the best metaphor so far. Cats don't have chairs.
How would they go to view this sporting event? It's hard to even imagine, like what that would look like if they don't have like butts in the same way that human beings do.
I like the idea that because like water takes any shape, they could be suspended in like globes, right, in like bulbs, and they can be positioned like all the way around, like above, below, on the side, and it's like in these little bulbs all the way, like decorating everything. Can I imagine that?
Yeah,
that's what I'm imagining. And then fire can I don't know. That's as far as I got.
There's like the fire has like fireplaces or something. I don't know. I mean, that's still a human kind of conceit, but at least it's a place where fire is in our human world, not on chairs.
Yeah, just little piles of logs that they can all burn on.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
There
That's
you go.
good.
Oh,
I like that.
there you
I like
go.
that, yeah.
Logs. Oh my God, it's right there. See, like I have to believe that conversations like this had to have happened, but it was either like, oh, this is too complicated. All right, we have to just make it the most basic dumb thing ever, or like you said, Kev, maybe it was like a mandate where it's like, no, this is it's too creative. Make it less creative.
Well, I mean, I also feel like that is a lot to just have the viewer take on faith, that they're going to understand what they're seeing. Like, oh, this is supposed to be like a
Sure.
sports stadium, but there's a bunch of glasses and there's no chairs, and there's like these logs that just have fires on them. I don't understand what I'm seeing. How is this supposed to be a sports stadium? So, I mean,
Yeah,
they
that
dug themselves
definitely-
into that hole by having this concept
Yeah,
be the movie.
exactly. Yeah. I think that kind of gets to the heart of it. Is okay if you want a movie that is the concept that is elemental things that are beings, people, whatever. Okay, that's interesting. Let me see that.
Yeah.
Okay, the movie you showed me was not that. The movie you showed me was just a normal movie, but they looked like fire and like it just feels like they didn't actually do what the premise was.
Yeah,
In which case, why even make them elemental?
I feel like
creatures.
the movie could have I think if it really wanted to make us understand the world, it should have spent like another hour explaining things
Yes.
because like it just tosses you into this place and says, "Oh, these are basically humans, but there's a few quirks that make them slightly different from humans." But, if they really wanted to focus on the elemental thing, they could have like really drilled down and like come up with cool ways to visually represent that. But it's also like
Yeah.
there's a trade-off because they also want to make a movie that you can swallow that's less than 2 hours and that anyone can go watch and understand what's going on. And on that front, I think they've succeeded. That you could show this to a child and they'll be like, "I recognize
Yeah,
this.
you could-
This looks
yeah.
like my life, just slightly different."
Yes. It reminds me of I'm trying to think of, I guess I was trying to think of other films that maybe have done something maybe more successfully in this regard, right? And I've thought about this film, this reminded me a lot of this film, is Zootopia. And now it's slightly different, right? Because animals aren't as crazy as elements
Yeah.
being personified. But I think Zootopia is a good example of how you can take a concept that's this premise of, ooh, they're animals are people. But I think that film actually does a really good. It seems to me that they did think about. They did spend the time to actually develop what a world would look like if it was like animals became sentient and self-aware and had jobs and language and stuff. And the way the city, it's again just one city, but they kind of have it broken up into the different biomes, and they have the different small for the smaller animals and the small
Yeah.
I think. That is maybe, not that film is perfect by any means, and there's probably plenty of things, world building, that are kind of silly, but at least it doesn't, those things aren't shoved into your face, and the stuff that is world building is done really well in the background of the core investigation and character stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know, just a comparison, I think.
Yeah, I think it is at least it's certainly a better example of world building where they don't need to spend a whole lot of time giving you exposition
Yeah.
about the world. You get to kind of experience it along with our main characters as they go through their
Yeah.
investigation. And that's the kind of thing I like, right? Where you can kind of just see it and experience it to understand it. And
Yeah.
and it does seem like this world was that is to say the world of Zootopia was at least thought about and adapted. Okay, well, what would happen if we had all these large
Yeah.
animals and small animals and blah blah
Mhm.
blah? How would a society form around that?
I think a thing too that kind of even conveys that there's so many sequences in this film where it feels like the characters who are supposedly have lived their lives in this city, in this world, are acting as if they're the audience, as if they're surprised and discovering these things for the first time. I mean, going back to a little bit what I was saying about the hot air and fire and stuff, but it just seems like there's so many of those things happening throughout this film that these characters don't even feel like they live in this world.
Right, they need right. They don't feel like true residents of this world. They
And there's other small things too, like inconsistency is another big thing. Like there's the scene where they're on a montage going on dates, and she goes to try to drink something, but it evaporates right away, right? Like the water that she's trying to drink. But then other times they touch, and the water hits her and it splashes her, and it doesn't evaporate. Again, I'm not saying that any of this in and of itself is like the end of the world, whatever. But I think just all of this collectively add together, and then the big thing for me is going back to kind of the stakes is, so is everyone just like immortal or something? Like, why is he not dead? Do they not know that do water people not know that they could evaporate and come back? Like, it's again, I think people would know that if they could, and it undermines that entire scene, I think too, that he just is fine.
Yeah,
I don't know. I had a big issue with that.
Yeah, there was never a doubt that he was actually dead, but it was always like that thing, like, okay, be bold, do something, and it's meaningful, and I mean, yeah, it's a happy kids movie. They have to have their cake and eat it too, but yeah, it's like, oh, I guess no one knew that you could do that. Like, no, and also jumping ahead a little bit, like, no fire and water people have ever touched. That's never happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
I mean, you're talking specifically about how he says that their chemistry changed when they touched or whatever. I mean, maybe nobody's ever touched for as long as they did, or maybe nobody's ever touched with the same intent that they did, with loving intent. I mean, fire and a water person. I don't know. And as for the guy evaporating, as for Wade evaporating, my understanding was just that he evaporated all but like a little drop that was on the ceiling and that they didn't see, so they just assumed that he was all gone, but there's still a little drop of him left. That was my reading of that scene.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of took that too, but I guess what I'm saying is then like, but has that never, like, they didn't know that they could just, as long as there's a drop of them left, he's fine?
Yeah, no, I'm laughing because you're just making me think of this horrifying world where just like this is constantly happening. Just like human beings are just evaporating and like, I'm just saying that like as a species, as humans, we very, very quickly had to understand what killed us. Yeah. Right? Like so it just is completely, and I'm not saying I want a deep anthropological dive into how water people live and die in specific. But I just feel like something like that is like that's never. It's like if like humans, we didn't know we died if our heads got cut off or something. Like I think we knew that fairly early on. No, I mean, don't you think that they did understand, and they did understand that he evaporated and that there could be some of him left, and they just didn't see it. They just assumed that he was all gone just because of the way the room is. Maybe. That was my assumption, but I don't know.
I see what you're saying. Okay, maybe. I didn't get the impression that they knew that he would still be fine after evaporating, but they didn't ever explicitly say otherwise. So yeah, okay, I could maybe
plausible.
See where you're coming from there. Also, like, there's a scene where or the little Earth thing that likes Ember, the little Earth kid.
Oh yeah,
whatever that guy was.
Claude or something.
He's growing. So how do plants grow on Earth people? Are they pouring water? Are water people like?
Well, I think
like
water. I think there's
Earth
two things. Like, water can exist that isn't sentient in this world.
Okay. Yes.
I think.
Yes. Okay.
So water is essentially the Great Link.
I was thinking about that. Like, can water people conjoin and just become gooey together?
I guess. Well, like Wade's family, some of them were all in the house pool. They weren't maybe necessarily together. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about fire, though, too, fire joins, air join, everything joins.
Yeah.
All of these things could join.
How are children made in this world?
I would also ask myself that question, because I was like, oh man, are they gonna? Because in the post animatics where it's like the 2D animation, I was like, oh no, are they gonna show them have not oh no, I just mean like, are they gonna show them having a kid? What does this mean? What would that be?
Yeah, what is a baby fire? How is a baby fire born?
Yeah.
I mean, she was pregnant, so her stomach was larger. Does she, like, is
Yeah.
there a womb? Is there a fetus?
Yeah, man, if
A
they
fire
hadn't
fetus?
shown the fire mom with a pregnant belly, I wouldn't have thought about this, but they made that choice, and it was
Yes,
like,
that's what I'm saying. Is like, why did you show that?
Yeah.
It's all it does is create questions.
But no one wants to think about.
Yeah, you didn't have to show us her big pregnant belly. We would have been fine believing that a crazy fire being was pregnant if you said, "Oh, we're gonna have little firelings or embers or whatever."
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking like, okay, well, fire itself doesn't have like mass, right? So it's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
so they're like weightless almost. They're like weightless entities, kind of, or something. I was like, oh, but okay, never mind. Her belly is full of a baby, so I don't know.
but on the flip side, everyone who watches this understands what a pregnant belly looks like.
I get,
Right.
yeah, I think you're right on. That's definitely something that probably I wasn't thinking enough about. Is just like the visual recognition of familiarity, and I
Yeah.
guess that's powerful. It still just begs the question. Then it's just like, why do elements?
Yeah, I think just
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's a flawed concept that never should have made it past
Yeah.
the initial idea,
Yeah.
but it did, and they ran with it.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that the younger kids who this is kind of geared towards, they probably aren't asking these same questions. They're not wondering like, how did the fire lady become pregnant? What's a fire wiener look like, or whatever. But they do
Kids
know what a
should be
pregnant
asking
belly
these
is, So
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
I actually did not ask myself what a fire wiener looks like, but now I am, Kevin. Kev.
yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, appreciate it. A couple more notes on the world building, although we've been on this note for a while, but just a couple quick little notes that fish exist in this world.
Yeah.
Like
What
I
are
know that's
they?
not a big thing, huh?
What are they? What are they?
Yeah, exactly. What are fish? Like, how come no one's freaking out? Like, what are these things? It's not fire, earth, or Anyway, that was just.
Do they think they're like parasites? Do the water people think they're parasites or something?
It would be as weird for us to see a sentient being made of flame, right? Like, oh my, it would blow our mind
Yeah.
and just entire concept
Yes.
of reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a carbon-based mass thing that has cells and a heart and a circulatory system.
Right.
What is this thing that's swimming around?
Right.
Yeah.
I had something else that I wanted to complain about. Oh, this is.
go for it.
I was like, yeah, last note maybe is. Well, I guess this is kind of getting into more of the thematic stuff, but like, so the fire people eat the earth people,
Oh my
Well, they eat
god.
Earth something.
right? They're consuming all the little fire sticks to kind of refuel themselves and stuff.
Yeah.
But those are the earth people.
I don't know. I mean, if you're states of matter, like, dude, that's what I'm saying. The concept of eating shouldn't factor into like, if you're a ball of dirt, you don't eat things.
Yeah.
If you're like, I don't know.
I mean, obviously, yeah, we understand that flames need fuel, but earth, air, and water don't need fuel.
Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah.
Exactly.
I don't understand.
I don't either. That's the whole thing with this dumb world that doesn't make sense.
One thing that I was like, kind of as the film was going in the middle of the film. Oh, there's some fire in the sky. As I was like in the middle of it, as they're investigating, I was actually kind of hopeful and kind of like into, for a while, the potential of what I thought was going to happen. And that is, we're investigating, why is the water flowing here? What's going on here? And I was like, ooh, is it going to be some like Chinatown, like water rights, some like, some nefarious under... machinations and forces and this political maneuvering and they're gonna an opportunity to address some of the actual seemingly racial things going on in this film. No, it was just a boat kind of splashes water.
Yeah,
when it goes by.
I
Like,
thought this-
what? That was their big plot thing? I was so disappointed.
Yeah, like
by
I
that.
thought the same thing because Wade on 2 occasions.
Yeah.
He like smells the water and says, "Oh, there's like motor oil." I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
what does this
Yeah.
mean?" There's some nefarious force at work that blew up this dam, which they never solved that either. I don't like.
Yeah,
Right, how
just
come that
the
dam was
door
blown
was
open?
old. Yeah, I had no explanation.
But yeah, so I was like, oh, that's how they're going to fall in love. They're going to go on this investigation together, and then in through solving it, they're going to have like good relationship stuff happen. And yeah, I thought it was going to be something about that too, Sean. Where it's like, oh, yeah, it looks like the racial overtones, like the fire people are living in the
then
slums,
you have like
and something about that. But no, it was just again poor city planning.
let's make some canals go through this part of the town that will kill the people who live in that part of the town.
Yes, I don't. It's so baffling and just a missed opportunity. If
Yeah, like I mean, imagine again, like Chinatown, or you like businesses, the rights of water, or they're trying to like push the fire people out of the city by accidentally, quote unquote, having water flow the wrong way, and the Earth people are the politicians are in collusion with the air priests or something. I don't know, right? Like there's potential cool opportunity for stuff going on there, but as a boat, why are there boats? Why do they even have boats? Why, like. I don't know. I mean, I guess the Earth people need boats, but the Earth, that's it. Everything's just for the Earth people, I think. That's the...
Yeah. The Earth people are just a footnote in this movie, too. Get almost none of them.
Yeah. There's like one of them, one of the characters, like his supervisor, and that's kind of it. He's an Earth person. And the little
and the
kid.
little kid. Yeah.
Keeps growing flowers out his armpits.
Which Ember destroys.
Yeah, I know. She kills that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. Well, okay. I guess one note, just Sean, you had made a note about you didn't really buy their falling in love kind of thing, and it was pretty shallow. But I thought what they were gonna do is, I'm sorry.
I take it that was not intentional.
No, it was. That's why I was I thought it was going to be something where they couldn't ever touch. Like they maybe would try, but then realize it actually wouldn't work. But their love was strong enough to overcome that. And I think that would have said maybe something different message-wise. I don't know if it better or worse, but I think it would have been something more maybe interesting I think, to explore. Yeah. And also it would make me it reminded me of Pushing Daisies, which is one of my favorite shows of all time. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that show.
Nope.
But it's Brian Fuller, who I believe you guys are a fan of.
Yeah, love him.
Based on his work, yeah. You should watch it. It's fantastic. But it is, amongst other things, the main characters who are in love can never touch, for reasons that are, And it's super compelling and super heartwarming. It's one of my favorite shows. I was like, oh man, that would have been so great if they, did this in a Pixar film and just made it as equally heartwarming and lovely. Anyway, that they didn't do that, so I guess it's fine. It's fine.
Or like Rogue and Gambit. They can't touch
yeah, that's good too.
It's also a plot element in the show Legion. So there's no shortage of shows.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Where people can't touch and they're in love. And that's a good point, because I was going to say they kind of wrote themselves into a corner by making this romance where they physically can't touch each other, but it's worked before. It's not necessarily, that's not the only thing that's keeping it from being believable. And it's hard for me to pinpoint what else would be a contributing factor, but I think just the fact that I don't really get much of a sense of either of these characters. I think they all feel, both of the main characters feel like they're really painted in very broad strokes, but I never really understood either of them. I mean, I get they're like really broad motivations, but I don't understand why they're drawn to each other really that much at all.
Yeah, I guess she's a little bit more fleshed out, I feel, than Wade. Wade, I feel
he cries a lot.
Less like he cries a lot, and that's like that's the only personality trait.
Yeah.
And she kind of says how generous he is, and there's the scene where he starts the wave, right?
Right.
It's like, okay, and she falls in love with them because of those, but I never got a sense that they were like actually attracted to each other. They just were both the main characters. I mean,
it's hard to imagine why they would be attracted to each other, because they both literally will kill each other.
I know.
by touching.
Right.
So what causes that physical attraction, I wonder?
and also like even like even intellectually or like I never saw that like she was like drawn to him, even if she like didn't like it. She was still like, ooh, I kind of do like. I never got that sense. It's just like, oh yeah, he's a friendly guy. Yeah, I'm hanging out. But really, I guess they love each other. I mean, I guess not all love has to be like so romantically melodramatic, but I was hoping that it was just going to be like a platonic relationship, and like, oh, that's kind of like that's kind of unique. And it just felt very kind of forced in there to me.
Yeah. Like you said, it's not, it's not like they need to give us exactly objective reasons, but it is harder to swallow when it's like, okay, her personality is, she clearly values hard work, dedication, loyalty, those kinds of things, right? I think that's with her family structure where they're very close, and she's demonstrated that by her commitment to the shop and her father and her family, as opposed to Wade, who he says that he's just kind of like a drifter in terms of like his career. He has no commitment. He's willing to break the rules because he doesn't care about his job. It just feels like that would that be attractive to her? Someone who's not driven and kind of just... I mean,
I could see it as like one of those opposites attract, right? But I think they needed to play that into... Like, it was not apparent enough. They needed to play harder into that angle if that was what they were going for.
Yeah.
Because it came across as too just middling to me for it to be effective. And I don't even think it was... That's the other thing, is I don't think that like this story was needed for it to be romantic. I think the story that they were telling and their characters would have worked even if they were just really good friends. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if it needed to be that like they were in love.
Yeah, actually agreed. And if they still wanted to kind of play that card where they needed to touch, there could have been any number of scenarios in which we need them to interact or that can come into play. They didn't do that. And as it was, what did them touching contribute exactly? Because if a conflict in the story is that they cannot touch, then their touching must be then meaningful, right? So what did them? It's like they we can't touch, and then they did, and then it's like, okay, well, I guess that is not a conflict anymore.
I'm trying to remember a little bit. I would to play devil's advocate. I would say maybe just for her, it was a character moment for her, like a character turning point.
Was it though? Because immediately after that, she rejects him.
Well, I think she rejects him. Because she's afraid, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I'm just like trying to kind of work through potentially seeing. Yeah.
They literally changed their chemistry when they touched.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what changed. I don't know why that matters. Like you were saying, Ryan. I don't know why it's relevant to anything, but it is what they say.
Yeah, you're right. It is what they say, and I thought that was like interesting that he said that line. I was like, "Oh, cool. What is that going to mean?" And then they don't ever really go back to it. So I don't know what that means.
Yeah, no idea. I'm assuming it means that they can touch, and who knows, maybe they can have fire water babies. I don't know. What is the implication there?
Yeah, exactly. What is?
Yeah. See, what fire and water? That would be steam, or would that be lava?
Air babies? Is that how air is made?
Yeah. So and lava is like earth. So that's how. So they would either create earth or air babies.
Weird.
That would be. There's some world building right there.
Yeah.
I guess. Well, we've been dancing around it for most of the conversation, but I feel let's jump into it and talk about the giant problematic thing in this room, and that is it's bad. This movie's pro ethno state. This movie's pro segregation.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's not actively that. I know it's not like set out to make a film that is that, but the way that this world is set up, it can't be anything but that. We've said it multiple times. fire and water literally cannot exist at the same like they water kills fire. Fire kills water, or evaporates it.
Yeah.
So if you're making a film about cultures and immigrants and blending of cultures and this idea as a metaphor for humans, obviously, I mean we are humans. We are the intended audience.
Yeah.
And the idea of immigrants and cultures mixing and disenfranchisement. There is no other way to take that than these things must be separated.
Well,
because I mean,
or at least again separated. Like if the world wanted to paint a picture in which they didn't need to be separated, like geographically, as you're indicating that is the reality of this film, then the world needs to have adapted to allow them to coexist. Like if they're riding on the subway or on that train, if they're riding on the train together, there needs to have been affordances such that they can do so. But as it is, not only does water kill fire, but fire kills earth. We see it multiple times in the film where she blows up an earth person.
Yeah.
Yes. There's lots of like, are we supposed to be laughing at this?
I wasn't laughing at it. This is horrible.
If there is, let's say there is a murderer in this world, what would this murderer be doing to the different elements to kill them? And how would it differ than what we've seen in this film?
I mean, that's a good point, because as we've seen, it seems like only fire can really die, just get entirely extinguished. It seems like water is essentially immortal.
Yeah, it's vague with their earth and air, because we don't get enough of them in general.
Yeah, I guess air would be hard to beat. I'm glad we're thinking about how to kill all these elements.
Well, as RPG players,
that's true.
It's second nature.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously that is not great, but I think there's something even deeper here than just that idea of elements can't really coexist, and that is, Black people, Chinese people, Asians, Indians, Mexicans, Americans, Europeans, Canadians, whatever, we do not kill other cultures when we stand next to them. If a Norwegian person stands next to a South African person, nothing happens. They can coexist. And that, I think, is the more nefarious, again, not necessarily intentional, but the more nefarious thing is by having these creatures be physically different, it subconsciously reinforces the idea that human races are different on some level. Other than cultural. And that is a very, 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 very bad viewpoint. That is what Tucker Carlson thinks. That's what, right-wing crazy neo-Nazis think, that white people must be separated and Jews must be separated and black people must be separated because we are so different biologically that we cannot coexist. And this film is not agreeing with the crazy neo-Nazis per se, but it is painting a world that supports that worldview. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, well, I mean...
Yeah.
I think that does make sense, and what you're supposed to take away from the movie is they find a way around that. Obviously, they find out that they actually can mix, and that their fears were unfounded, that water and fire can actually touch. But that happens at the end of the movie, and it's almost like they've lived their entire culture's histories without having ever tried that, which is strange. They've never, no one's ever discovered this. And yeah, I mean, like you said, there's a difference between I don't understand this other culture because they're different, and I literally need to stay away from this other being because I will die if I go near them. I mean, those are two different things. And to equate the two is kind of... It is kind of a weird... I mean, I understand and I like the idea of making a metaphor to kind of boil the idea down to something simple that can be understood by anyone, but... I mean, so I guess I'm putting myself in the shoes of, I'm a younger child, and if I'm watching this, then I'm going to understand, the main thing I'm going to take away is they thought that they could never get along and never be friends because they're fire and water, but in the end they do. They do find a way to get along and to be friends and to, even be in love. So, I mean, that on a very basic, simple level, that is, I think, what a young child is going to take from this. It's when you get into a lot of the, like, nitty-gritty stuff where it really seems to be hammering home the idea of these being different ethnicities. That's where it starts to feel strange to me. Like, the things that it does to bring in a larger audience in on that idea of these being segregated peoples, that's where I start to feel weird about it. Like, why are the fire people? Why do they have to clearly be Asians? Why is that a thing?
Right, I would have.
And the water people are clearly like waspy.
Yeah.
They read as white,
Caucasian or whatever.
Yeah,
exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Actually, I think it would have gone a lot further. Just like just being inventive and creative, and just it's important to establish that they're distinct culturally, right? To make their point. But it doesn't need to read so one-to-one like that.
Yeah.
I think the one-to-oneness is kind of the bigger issue.
Yeah.
And I mean, we talked about Zootopia a little bit, and I want to bring it up again because I think this is another example where I think Zootopia does a better job with that. And on retrospect, I think there's some elements of Zootopia that, maybe actually aren't like great. But I think one of the reasons it succeeds is that it doesn't have a one-to-one metaphor for the animals and human cultures or races.
Yeah.
And specifically the predator and prey. They actually do a good job of not making, no, this is not supposed to be specifically minorities, and, the dominant class or anything like that. It kind of goes back and forth where they talk about even the history of how the prey were always subjugated by the predators. And now, so with that, there's a little bit of disconnect from the human, and it allows us to then project our own meaning on that, and I think it works much better. Plus, Zootopia, another example of, as much as maybe, their nature of a lion would eat a rabbit in their history, a lion still does not kill a rabbit just by standing there. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Intrinsically, they do not make each other not exist.
Right. Also, Kevin, you made a good point about just the idea of these two cultures, these two peoples getting along and even fall in love. I think that made me realize that, well, if young folks are going to watch this, as you say, I mean, they are going to watch this. I don't need you to tell me that. There was plenty of crying babies in my theater. But I think if that's the message they're walking away with, I think the filmmakers have done those audience members a disservice in that I can get along with, just picking, opposed races or just whatever, historically, that, these two people can get along if they fall in love. Right? That's not good. I mean, there's a lot of tension in different parts of the world, blah, 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 but people can get along. It doesn't, love doesn't need to be the key. And when I mean love, exactly. I mean romantic love. And romantic love is a very specific kind of love that there is a large, tall barrier to entry that need not be surmounted to achieve getting along.
Yes.
And coexistence.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like they were even talking specifically about the touching and
right.
The touching, when they touch and they change the chemistry. Like, okay, that's great for you guys, but that is, on a larger scale, that's bad. If the only solution we could find to our differences is people have to fall in love, okay, we have a flawed system. Yeah. And I know they're not being so cynical about it, and they kind of paint a little more collectively wholesome picture at the end when all the different elements are kind of intermingling a little bit more, but it comes across as very lip servicey, not earned at all. It's like these two people fell in love, now it solved racism. That again, that's a very green booky way of thinking of race relations. That's It's just like,
Also, going back to Zootopia, it's the rabbit and the fox. They don't fall in love, right? They're it's platonic,
yeah,
right?
that's another reason I think that relationship works really well.
And I really
cool.
like
And
that
also,
relationship because it feels genuine, and I feel like I would like, oh man, these are such good friends. I wish I had a friend
and
like
that
this.
film actually has a plot that is about, like machinations and corrupt politicians and the powers manipulating and I don't know. The more I was thinking about this Elemental, the more I was comparing to Zootopia and like what I think Zootopia did a better job on almost every element
For
that
sure.
I had issues with.
Element, and didn't do a better job with making characters who are elements, though.
Yes, I guess that's the one thing it failed on. And even kind of to your point, Kev, about like, if I kind of squint and try to give them the benefit of the doubt of like, yes, they're trying to show like even things that are so different can still find commonality and connection. And I'm just going to keep beating this dead horse. I still think when you're dealing with humans, I know they're talking about elements, but as art and as human audience, when you're dealing with humans, that is still, you're already losing by posing this argument to begin with. We have, as humans, we are not different. White people are not different than black people. Asians are not different than Europeans. South Americans are not different than Canadians, right? Like, to even say that they are to begin with is already wrong. So it's nice to then say like, oh, see, differences can overcome everything. But if your premise is we are biologically different than these, I don't care how uplifting the message is at the end. It's still a wrong message to begin with. Like, I don't know how else to articulate it, but I think I'm clear. I hope that makes sense.
I think maybe the reason that I'm not quite so bothered by that is because I don't see it as being such an intentionally one-to-one comparison.
Yeah.
And I think that the problem is that the movie does kind of invite that one-to-one comparison.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that the reason that it does invite that is because it also is kind of showing us deliberately how these elements do represent actual cultures on Earth. I don't know if necessarily I would want to make the one-to-one comparison, saying that like these.
No,
this is
I don't
saying,
know if
this is saying
yeah.
that Asians and white people can't mix. That's what this movie is saying, and it's saying that it's physically impossible. I wouldn't necessarily want to make that if they weren't going out of their way to make sure that we know that the fire people are Asians. And
right. Yes, that's right. Like, it's too apparent. And even if it wasn't so specifically Asian or, even maybe like Middle Eastern, I think, too, to an extent.
Yeah.
It very clearly is a minority disenfranchised population and a empowered, more hegemonic culture that is at odds, right? So even that being that specific already allows us to paint too closely a 1-to-1 ratio with our own culture. I just think that it's just like, how, and as the film was going on and on, I was like, okay, this is too obvious. They're going to have to address, this is going to be what the movie's about. And I was hoping by the end, there was going to be some like revelation or some like actual, maybe not so much a twist, but the actual message being, we are actually all the same element. I mean, it wouldn't have made any sense already in a world building.
But I like where you're going.
But that's the actual That's what the actual message should be. We are actually not different, other than these very surface level things that we perceive to have meaning. Because that's what race is and racism is. It's like, right? That's what the message should have been of this. Like, earth and air and water. Like, we're actually under the surface. We are the same. I don't know. Again, I don't think it would have. It doesn't make any sense
based on the world they built.
I don't know how.
Sean,
based on the world
going back to like Avatar: Last Airbender, I'm like, what if they're all just energy? They're just energy that got expressed in a slightly different way.
There's something. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like that's something that like cool. Give me. That's what I want. Is like, if they gave me that little nugget, at least a hint of that, I would have maybe been a little bit more okay with all of it, because I would have at least seen that they recognized some of the issues here, and that it wasn't there. That's what I was saying earlier when it was kind of baffling to me, is that it's just so like, how could no one have seen this when the film is about it?
I'm sure they did, and I think we would be remiss to not mention, if we're talking about the artist's intent, to not mention that this was in fact directed by a Korean American man.
Yeah, that is true, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think that is an important factor. I don't think it's fair to just like assume that just a generic white person is making this film or whatever. And I guess it's a perspective that as white Caucasian people, we can't fully appreciate that slightly different perspective. But if there's something I'm missing, I will be the first to admit it. If someone could kind of tell me what that is, I would be happy to think about it.
I think
as it is,
you're right. And I think that they're trying to strike a very delicate balance and making this world recognizable to us in some ways, and also telling this story about immigration and overcoming our differences, which obviously that's what they're going for is something in that general area.
That in of itself is laudable. That's a message I could get behind. It's just on top of a whole bunch of other stuff that it just makes it harder.
Yeah, it does become really, really unclear, I feel like. Certainly I don't think that I'm going to take away from the movie that it's like pro-segregation. I don't think that's its intention.
I don't think so either. No.
But I think it is easy to see a reading of that. And I could see somebody really seeing that. If you come to it with the right lens, you could see it as like, oh yeah, this is a movie that seems to be pro-segregation. It's not too much of a stretch to see somebody actually reading the movie that way, even though I think that's clearly not the intention.
Yeah, it's clearly not the intention, but I think it's one of those weird things where the text of the film, like it's a little bit of like, death of the author kind of thing, is like if you just took this film in isolation, not knowing the creative and not knowing kind of like in general kids movie culture and how those messages are always generally positive and uplifting. If you just took this film in isolation and read it for the text that it is, I think it would be hard not to see some of that in there.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but I think you're on the mark, Kev, that it's like looking at the intent is obviously the most important thing, and or at least in this case, and not to be that we're intentionally misreading the film or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It does beg some more kind of questions, and this is more just in general about film. It is just an interesting thing what if you just do bad, and I think this is the case, but what if my message is, we shouldn't do genocide, and the art that I create accidentally in ways I didn't think about actually reinforces the idea that like, oh yeah, we should do genocide. Like, but I didn't mean that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's an interesting question, and I think coupled with just like art in general, it is just like what. I'm not even saying it's a responsibility. I'm not saying like the filmmakers have a responsibility. No. I'm just like, I don't know. How do we interpret that? How do we deal with that? I don't know. It's just interesting. It's interesting thoughts.
Yeah, well, that's the cool thing about art is that everyone's going to bring. This is very much in line with conversations I've had with you guys via email recently. But everyone's going to be bringing their own baggage and have their own interpretations. Yeah. I think one of the things that Pixar is generally pretty successful at is making it fairly clear what those intentions are that they're usually successful at. This time around, they are very much not. That the intention is much less clear, and it's a lot more likely that you're going to have different people with different experiences bringing different interpretations, and that's usually not the case. I think anyone who watches WALL-E is pretty much going to get the idea of what WALL-E's trying to say, right? But with this, it's like it's so vague and there's so many layers of metaphor that it's like, a lot of people can read a lot of things, and that can be kind of dangerous, especially when you have, there's such a large audience, and you are going to get a lot of people who probably are racist and do kind of think segregation should be a thing, and that's when it becomes sort of dangerous. So, I mean...
And then the poor world building, I think, just complicates things even further too.
And that's what ultimately leads us back to like the original point, which is that this is it's a flawed idea for a movie. Yeah. They never should have ran with the original concept in the first place. That was their first mistake. Should have like stopped it at day one and then moved on to something else. But well,
don't have a whole lot more to say on that topic. I don't know if you guys have any other notes. I have like maybe one
No.
other,
No, I'm good.
and then I wanted to maybe end just like by saying something, maybe a couple notes that are more on the positive note. I think, like I said, I think we've gone through plenty of our complaints about the movie and critiques, but I do have some positive things, so it'd be good to maybe end on a positive note.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I one little small note is it was quite ridiculous that pretty much the main story part of this movie was that they had to fix the dam. I don't know why civilians are being tasked with this. It's the city's problem. So Ember
It is a positive.
is
This is a
tasked
positive?
with. No, this is my last complaint.
Oh, okay.
Right, my house
Oh, yeah.
flooded, like my condo flooded, and I go talk to the city water people, like, oh yeah, you're gonna have to go fix that dam that broke. But why do I? Yeah, it's your house that flooded. You gotta go fix it. Like, oh, okay, all right. But anyway, so on a positive note, I did actually like Ember's design. Her character design was probably my favorite thing of the movie. I don't think that's saying a lot. I think that just shows how much for me was not a lot to like in the movie. But I did genuinely like it. I liked her little dress. It looked like it was maybe kind of like intended to be made out of like lava cloth, or like these little interlinking like plates that felt like they're like heat resistant or something like that. So that was really cool. I did like her design. I liked when she would get like fired up and her like there'd be like new like purpley colors introduced into her like flaming aura. I liked it anytime like she would do glass blowing and glass bending. She'd make these really cool different colors. And as listeners of the podcast know, I'm a huge fan of glass blowing.
Right.
So that was actually one of my favorite parts of the whole thing. Anytime she got to like manipulate glass and melt it and make these cool
I did like
things.
how they kind of integrated that, because she's even doing that in the shop to kind of put the glass back on the displays and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that was kind of cool.
That was.
Also, I thought they did a good job of making the customers like be awful. Like,
Oh,
who are
yeah,
these
that was
awful people
great.
like shopping her.
There's somebody who's been in customer service jobs before that read very true. Just a nightmare position.
Yes.
Yeah. Nailed it. Anyway, so yeah, that's what I had. I don't know if you guys wanted to share some.
I think that's a great point. I think for all its faults as far as the world building goes, it looks nice. I mean, the world itself is visually interesting to look at, and I think the character designs are good.
There was nothing I had any like really strong negative thing. Some of it I felt was just kind of like meh, but then there was definitely stuff that I felt was okay. This is some impressive visual stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, definitely. Anytime they did a good job with like the lighting. Just like the thing where like her light would pass through water and it would make the pretty designs.
Yeah,
that was all really fun stuff. I don't know if it warrants $250 million.
Jeez, how did it cost?
I wonder
that
if
much
it went
money?
through like a lot of rewrites or something, and they had to keep doing. I don't know. It seems
Maybe.
because
Like
that's a lot.
reanimating.
Yeah.
And I will say it was generally short.
Yes.
It wasn't like super long, so that's a good. That was good.
Pixar's been pretty good about keeping them pretty short.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I would want to call out as a positive. I think as much as I think the characters didn't have a lot of personality, that I liked Wade. I think as a embodiment of sort of just a guy who is really kind-hearted and also cries a lot. I was like, all right, that's a good kind of representation to see in a kids movie.
Yeah, that's true. I'll give it a point for that as being like a very soft kind of a character.
Very
as
much.
opposed to like super masculine. Or
very not masculine, not traditionally masculine.
Yeah.
Yeah. While still being, I think in general, even though the chemistry I don't think was there, and they weren't like super interesting characters, they were likable characters. I would say.
Totally, yeah, I agree.
That's fair.
Wade and Ember. So
All right.
yeah, I think that's
all we gotta say
For
about
the
Elemental.
positives.
We didn't talk about the giant like bowing thing, which I think
Oh,
every time I think about the problems I have with the movie, that's the first thing that jumps to my mind is the giant, the big show they make out of bowing to each other, and I'm like, man, you could have removed that, and it would have helped a lot.
Yes.
yeah, probably.
and it's another one of those things where it doesn't have a strict like, oh, that's not from a real culture, but it obviously has very, clear things it's standing in for.
Yeah, exactly.
That it's trying to stand for, and it's trying to anyway. But it comes across as kind of tone deaf. Like
Totally, yeah. That's a really good way to describe this movie is tone deaf.
yeah. So go watch it, kids. Love it.
Well, I think kids are gonna love it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I'm
do.
sure
I mean, I'm sure if I was a kid, also just because it is like, magic fantasy elements.
Exactly, yeah.
I guess I'd probably
Yeah, eat that shit up.
For sure.
Oh well, just think about it a little bit harder, kids, when you get older. That's all.
Yeah.
Become cynical and jaded like us.
Yeah.
Yes, us. Find something wrong with everything.
Yeah.
That's how
How you know you're
grown up.
living a happy life.
Yeah. Learn to hate the things you once beloved.
Yes. It's another, we're kicking out good mottos for YumChunks.
We sure are. Yeah, we gotta get these
Totally.
sound bites.
Yeah.
Good. Well, if you listeners had some hot or watery or airy or solid takes on Elemental, let us know. Send us some emails, or tell us why we were tone deaf in our discussion, or tone hearing.
Pitch perfect?
Hearing enabled. Pitch perfect.
Tone, hearing, enabled. I hope to, on a future episode, hear Chewie's thoughts on this movie.
Yeah, I am curious because as of this recording, he's been very busy. Chewy, we know you've been very busy, and everyone go watch some Moonlight Theater productions this summer and catch Chewy working those shows. And I know he hasn't seen Elemental as of this recording, so maybe he will in the future. You could let us know.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, stay tuned, listeners. We will be doing Dial of Destiny.
Nice.
Hopefully shortly. We'll be talking about that next. And then more summer movies. There's Mission Impossible, Oppenheimer, Barbie. Hopefully we do all, if not most of those, and more.
Gran Turismo.
Secret Invasion, the Marvel show, is currently
That's right.
airing right now. We'll probably do that. So, still a lot of stuff coming down the pipe. And Comic-Con is right around the corner.
Yeah.
So all of the news that's not going to be happening because everyone's backing out of Comic-Con this year, we'll be here to report.
Well, we're gonna report on all the deep cuts, on all the
Yeah, exactly.
most extreme corners of nerddom that
If you want to hear the latest updates on the Klingon weddings that are happening, we will be the source.
Hell yeah.
Hear it. Yeah.
But Kev, thanks so much for joining us, especially on the short notice, listeners.
Yeah.
Peek behind the curtain is Kev was our emergency fill-in last minute, so thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure.
thank
I'm glad I could contribute.
It was great to have you here and add to the discussion.
Yeah.
Where can listeners hear you outside of some chunk firing?
Oh, well, I host a podcast called Reopening the Wormhole with Sam and Jack Stovold, where we talked about every episode of Deep Space Nine, a Star Trek show. That's what it's called, right? Deep Space Nine, a Star Trek show.
A Star Trek show, yeah. A Star Trek story.
A Star Trek story, yeah. And we're currently slowly going through all the rest of the Ferengi episodes and other Star Trek shows. I also have a podcast called The Great Bracket Racket, which I've got an episode in the bag that I am inching towards completing with the editing process. I can't wait to get it out there, but those come out whenever I feel like it, sporadically. And you can hear me on Jack's long-named Star Trek podcast often. I'm there a lot.
These podcast episodes you're on also would be good, just homework assignments for your classes. Just like turn in a 4-hour episode of talking about
Oh, yeah.
Discovery season 4 episode for no reason.
Yeah, I think that's
A+.
definitely what that's gonna help me a lot.
Now your teacher like,
11
wow, this is
people
really
rambling about
avant-garde
Michael Burnham.
music.
Yeah, exactly.
If there's a way that I could turn in one of Jack's Carlos specials, Christmas specials, as a
Oh man,
then
there you go.
yeah, I just want those to get the recognition they deserve. Those should be in a museum.
Well, yeah, listeners, stay tuned for Bracket Racket. I'm excited for that new episode sometime.
Yeah.
Who knows when?
Yeah,
Soon.
I am a fan.
Good.
It's good
I'll have
stuff.
to get you on one, Ryan.
Yeah, I'd love to be on.
Sweet. I'll have to figure out what topic I want to get you on for.
Okay, yeah.
Cool. Well, that's it. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a good night. Happy Independence Day.
Yeah.
Late, and go do some elemental stuff.
The perfect sign off.
Perfect sign off. So witty. So witty.
This has been
After the credits.
a YumChunks podcast.